What's going on? Going to talk about some transfer portal acquisitions and what it means to the overall program for programs that start with the letter U and the letter V today. So I only have about an hour and 5 minutes, so I'm going to try and get this done reasonably fast also. So we'll start off with Virginia Tech. Coach Mike Young, formerly of Wofford, has a very good team coming in. I expect them to be very dominant in the non-conference season, and that's because they brought in three potentially impactful transfers. Tyler Nickel, who didn't get off the bench much from North Carolina, Robbie Baran from Northwestern, who could be a very impactful transfer down low for this Virginia Tech team, who does play a lot of inside out offense. And then Makai Long, a guy who's worked his way up to being a dominant scorer at the mid-major level from Rhode Island to Old Dominion, now to Virginia Tech. I think that all three of these acquisitions have the potential to provide something that Virginia Tech needs. This is a Virginia Tech team that still returns Sean Padula and Hunter Couture, and they're looking for some elevated production and development from Rodney Rice and Michael Collins. I think that the other thing that you have to remember about Virginia Tech is that they can play a lot of low post offense and a lot of kickouts to the perimeter for 3-point shooters. And a guy like Lynn Kidd and Robbie Brand are going to form a really nice 1-2 tandem that is going to be efficient and effective on the glass. And they're also going to be able to score down low, which is important in this Virginia Tech scheme. I think that the first game that you really want to get on them is probably that game against Wofford that they play on the 19th of November. I think that with Coach Mike Young giving his old program a game, you're going to want to see a dominant performance. And I think that with these acquisitions and where they came from, I do think that they are going to adapt very nicely to being complementary scoring options to Padula and Couture's 3-point shooting. So, like Virginia Tech, and if I can get Virginia Tech in the range of like 15 to 17 and a half points as a home favorite versus Wofford, I'll be all over that. All right, let's talk about Virginia. Virginia, obviously coached by Tony Bennett still. Tony Bennett did a really good job of reloading up with some pretty interesting mid-major acquisitions. I think that going out and getting Dante Harrison, Jacob Groves gives you some good stability down low, some good low post and on the block scoring, which Jacob Groves has proved at Eastern Washington, at Oklahoma, that he can give you 10 points a game. It's just a matter of how much minutes is he going to play. Is he going to be playing 20 to 25, or is he going to get over that 30 threshold? I think that with Dante Harris coming in, this is a guy that we've seen be very explosive off the dribble. We've seen him be able to take care of the basketball, and we've seen him be able to get to the free throw line and make his free throws. So I do like what they brought in as far as guys from a higher level program. Obviously, with Reese Beekman and Isaac McNeely, you got a ball handling point guard, and then you got a good 3-point shooter. So you don't have a bare cupboard, even though this team did lose quite a bunch of guys. But I think that the next two transfer acquisitions that they made, in Andrew Rohde from St. Thomas and Jordan Miner from Merrimack, are going to pay heavy dividends. I'm definitely disagreeing with the analytics people on the projections for both these guys. I think Andrew Rohde could be a 12 to 15 point per game scorer. I think Jordan Miner is easily going to be close to a double-double. I think he's going to excel highly with his back to the basket and facing up on defenders on the baseline. And I just think that Tony Bennett brings guys in that he knows he can mold into something better. And I think that these two transfers, Rohde and Miner, are going to prove very significant, even though they are taking a big step up in competition, going from the NEC and the Summit League to the Atlantic Coast Conference. So I like what Virginia's done on the transfer portal. I think that The game that I'm most interested in them is just the first game. We've seen teams really fall on their face a couple times against some of these really tough defensive, slow possession, low possession type teams, and Tarleton State is one of those teams. Unfortunately, Tarleton State lost a lot. So if Virginia can keep them under 60 points, and I'm still looking at this team to be a top 50 defense, we're going to see Virginia flex their muscle. And if you see a 10 to 12 point line on that game, I'm going to have to ride Virginia at least to start off, just because I have such high projections on some of these transfer acquisitions. All right. Let's talk about Villanova. Villanova obviously is another team that has high expectations for this coming year, and it's hard not to see why. When you add Hakeem Hart from Maryland, TJ Bamba from Washington State, Tyler Burton from Richmond, you've really taken care of some of the issues that you're going to have with this team. Justin Moore, a full healthy year of him, could be All-American type numbers, 17 to 20 points per game. Eric Dixon with being the focal point down low and how physical and wide he is, you really need to add some length and some ability to stretch the defense. Hakeem Hart's going to give you some good rebounding, and he's going to give you that balanced scoring. TJ Bamba can handle the ball, and Tyler Burton's a go-to scorer. So not having to rely on the likes of Mark Armstrong, Jordan Lagano, and Chris Arcidiacono gives me a lot more positive feeling when I'm looking at this Kyle Neptune Villanova team, because they're experienced. They don't have to go deep, but they can go deep if they want. So I think that from the first game on against American, that's the best game for them to have a really nice route game. If I see the line between 15 to 16 and a half points, I'll definitely be looking at Villanova hard. I'll probably look at them up until about 19 and a half points, because after American and they play a non-D1 opponent, Lemoyne, they play Penn, which is a highly intense game because it's regional rivalry. Then Maryland, then Texas Tech, then St. Joe's, which is a regional rivalry game. Kansas State, UCLA, Creighton. That's a tough slate of games to start the year. So for an experienced bunch like this with a bunch of different versatile aspects to their games, I think that it's going to be real critical for Villanova's new guys, Bamba, Burton, and Hart, to really acclimate and show that they fit into this scheme right away. So interested to watch how they play, interested to see if they can rout American in the first game on the 6th of November. And we're 45 days away, so that's always good. All right, let's talk about Vermont. Vermont did a decent job on the transfer portal, also bringing in Brenton Mills from Bowling Green, Jace Rockamore from UC San Diego, who fits really well into the defensive style of basketball that John Becker wants to play. TJ Long from Fairfield, and Shamir Bogues from Tarleton State, another guy that Tarleton State lost. And I think Vermont is going to be that much better this year. I think the conference is better this year. UMass Lowell is still probably the top dog, but I do think that Brenton Mills, if he gets in the lineup and plays regularly in the rotation, he's going to put up some points. This is a guy that at Binghamton, he put up numbers. So I expect him to do that going forward. I think that he's really underrated in the projection rankings for him. Obviously, TJ Hurley, a fellow Canadian of mine, is going to have to compete with him for minutes, but I do think that we're going to see him take a step forward. And listen, TJ Long is a guy that can give you 10 points a game. And Rockamore, he's a guy that can get on the glass and he can play heavy minutes and really defend. So I really like what they've done acquisition-wise, because this is going to be Aaron Deloney's team. He's going to be the top dog on it. It's about everybody else fitting in and finding their groove. And I think that a guy like Shamir Bogues, with how he's able to break things off and get to the rim at will, that's going to be really beneficial, because obviously Deloney's undersized and Bogues at 6'4" will give him some protection and definitely can play through some double teams when trying to get to the bucket. I think that this Vermont team is going to be very good. I'm just really interested to see how they match up in some of their more difficult non-conference games, like versus Bradley, Yale, and Charleston. So Nothing really that's popping out the first couple games. I do think that they schedule um, difficult non-conference games, but I do think that they can win that game against Bradley, especially if they're a 5 or more point underdog. So looking forward to watching Vermont, and we'll move on to Vanderbilt. So with Vandy, hold on. So with Vanderbilt, I'm not really too impressed with what they did on the transfer portal. I think that they brought in a guy from Notre Dame in Lubin who couldn't play his way into the lineup, so now we had to transfer. Camatereros from South Dakota. I think that he's a solid, I guess, low post defensive rebounding type player, not a guy that's going to give you a ton of big offensive games. And then they brought in Evan Taylor from Lehigh, which I think that it's a big step up in competition for him going from from the Patriot League going to the SEC. So I'm not really impressed with what Vanderbilt did with what they lost and what they brought in. I think that Vanderbilt's going to be shark food. So we'll see what happens there. All right, let's talk about Valparaiso. Valparaiso is probably going to be one of the whipping boys in the nation. I don't like what they did on the transfer portal. I don't see any impactful acquisitions. And when I look at their projection wise, I think they're going to lose a lot of games. I think that they're not going to be able to cover numbers. And in any game, especially the first two, they play against IUPUI. I think they lose outright. And then they play Green Bay, and I think they lose outright both those games. Connor Barrett and Darius DeVario are going to have to be freaking miraculous offensively, because I just don't have any kind of physical proof that anybody else on this roster is capable of doing anything. So we'll see what happens. I think Roger Powell Jr. has his hands full in the Missouri Valley Conference with a team that is going to struggle offensively, but probably still be at least respectable defensively. Not a team I'm going to be looking to bet on. Looking at a team to fade first two games against IUPUI and Green Bay. All right. Let's talk about VCU. Now, VCU did a really good job on the transfer portal. I like what they brought in. I like what Ryan Odom is going to start with back in the East Coast, playing some Atlantic 10 basketball. First off, bringing Sean Barstow and Max Shugla over from Utah State. Great job. Getting Joe Bamsili from Oklahoma, who really thrived at George Washington and really sucked an egg at Oklahoma. Roosevelt Wheeler is good, big body, lengthy, very good defensively from Louisville. And then Cooney from California. I think that there's a lot of good size. I think that this team obviously has to gel together, but I think that they're going to be very good defensively. I think they're going to be able to score from the perimeter and really run on you. And it's going to be really about what kind of ball handling you're going to get. Is Jason Nelson from Richmond going to be able to step up and be the point guard this team needs? Or are you going to have to rely on Shugla and Zeb Jackson to handle the ball definitely in transition and in the half court? So I think VCU has some questions, but I like what VCU brought in, and I like even better the system and style of play that VCU is going to play with Ryan Odom now coaching. And I just say this, it's going to be a good defensive team, but I do think that we are going to see them take a step back versus what we've usually seen with VCU and Coach Rhodes. So. All right, let's talk about Utah Valley. Now, obviously, I was a little hurt by the fact that Mark Madsen left for California. It's probably one of the worst jobs, but now with what he's done in the transfer portal, it's looking like a pretty good spot to land. Utah Valley brought in some people because obviously they lost guys. Two guys of note that I'll talk about. Trevin Dorius from Utah State, the 7-footer, and Caleb Stone Carwell from Austin P, the big man. I think that those guys are going to be very well fitted for this team and for this program and for the conference. Rob Jeter knows how to use some of these skilled big men, and I think that Dorius is going to finally be the focal point of a team's offense. Utah Valley has a good history of using scoring big men well, and I do think that this is a guy that has waited his turn patiently, and it's time for him to take over. Outside of that, I do like the fact that they bring in Tanner Toolson. I'm not sure if he's going to be eligible to play, though, so I still have to wait back on that. I think that Utah Valley defensively is going to be hard to score against. The question is going to be, do they have enough perimeter scoring? And outside of Drake Allen, I'm not really sure what to expect. So Utah Valley and Rob Jeter may have a little bit of trouble early on, but I do think that fading them against Sam Houston State at Sam Houston State is the way I have to do it. It's going to be a defensive game, and I do think that Utah Valley's offensive struggles show up more so in that one than some of their other non-conference games. All right, let's talk about Utah Tech. Utah Tech brought in Trey Hall from Evansville, which is a good acquisition, and then Beon Riley from Hawaii. Listen, I think that this is a Utah Tech team that if you have to rely on Tanner Christensen to be the number one scoring option in your offense, it's a big problem. But this is a big Utah Tech team. They can play 3, 6'10" guys or taller at the same time if they want, because all their big men can run the floor. I think that this is going to be a tough team to get defensive rebounds against, but I think that if you can beat a team like this with your quickness, you're going to be able to get offense all day. I think Utah Tech is going to struggle to score from the perimeter, and I don't think that they've really answered that issue, even with getting Trey Hall. So Utah Tech may struggle, but they'll be interesting to see how Noah Conclaves adjusts to being the starting point guard when Utah Tech has had such a good run with Frank Stain over the last couple seasons. All right, let's talk about Utah State. Obviously, this is the Montana State coach, Danny Sprinkle, coming in to take over Montana State. And he's got a really good team. I think that they're top 100 in my rankings. I think that this is going to be a good defensive team, but I definitely think that they're going to be effective offensively. I want to target them in their quad 4 games, and some of those include Southern Utah, San Diego, East Tennessee State. I think even Wyoming qualifies as one too. So I think that with Utah State, you have a lot of new pieces that are going to have to mesh together. But I do think that Ian Martinez, Josh Uduji, Max Agbonkapolo, are all going to have good impacts. I think that these are guys that are experienced. They're not afraid of physical play, and with Danny Sprinkle teams, you have to be an aggressive on-ball defender. I think that you have a good ball handling point guard in Darius Brown that remains on campus, and I just think that this is a Utah State team that is going to be playing different than what we saw with Ryan Odom, but still going to be very, I would say they're going to be very beneficial to our bankrolls, at least early on in the season, against the quad 4 games that obviously with Montana State and Darius Brown and Danny Sprinkle already having a relationship. They also brought in Great Osborne from Montana State, so we'll see how he plays. But Uduji is the guy that I think can make the biggest impact. At Coastal Carolina, he was pretty dominant, and I do think that he's going to be even better for Utah State. It's just about how fast they mold and get together. But Utah State is definitely top 100 team to start the season for me. All right, let's talk about Craig Smith, Utah State's former coach, Utah Utes. Now, obviously, with Utah, they needed to bring in some reinforcements for guys like Brandon Carlson, Gabe Madsen, and Raleigh Worcester. But now they brought in a guy like Devion Smith from Georgia Tech, Lawson Lovering, the 7-footer from Colorado, and Cole Bajima from Washington, formerly also Michigan. I think that these are really good acquisitions for Utah, good supplemental pieces that will fill voids filled by past graduations and other transfers. I think that this is going to be a very balanced Utah team, and I think that they're going to be a Pac 12 contender. I think that obviously their quad four games are the games I want to target in the non conference. I think that they can really put some thumpings on some teams, especially when they're playing some of these games at home. We know from last year, Utah's defense was very good, especially at home in the non conference, regular keeping teams to 60 and under. And I do think that with three legitimate almost 7-footers or 7-footers, you're going to be able to do that again. You're going to be able to protect the rim. You're going to have some fast point guard that can handle the ball and speed the offense up when needed. And I think that with Raleigh Worcester, he's going to really take ownership of this offense from the perimeter standpoint. And we've seen what he can do at Utah State as a reserve. Now he's going to be the focal point alongside Brandon Carlson. So Utah's going to be good. Utah just has to stay healthy. And I think that they've done a really good job on the transfer portal of filling some of their needs. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Steve Henson's UTSA team was definitely busy on the transfer portal, but I'm not really completely sold on what he's doing here. I like the name recognition of a lot of his transfers. He brought in a Dante Holloman from UT Rio Grande Valley. He brought in scoring guard Justin Thomas from Milwaukee. He brought in Jordan Ivy Curry, lead guard from Pacific. He brought in Dre Fuller from UCF. So there's a lot of talent, but how's the offense going to be dictated? What's the rotation going to be? So many question marks with this team because all of their main contributors are new acquisitions. So I think that with this UTSA team, I think they're going to be able to score the basketball. The question really is going to be, can they defend and can they keep the ball out of their own net? So I think that the other thing is, what are they going to do size wise? Now, the only guy that they really have that legitimately can play the 5 spot is Carlton Lingard. And at Kansas State, he was not effective. He hasn't really been effective so far at UTSA. And this is a brand new year. So maybe he'll be a brand new player. I think that this is a UTSA team that has a lot of question marks with their depth, but they really had to reinvent themselves on the fly. So for a team that needed to replace as many key parts as they did, I do think on paper they've done a decent job. So we'll see what happens, but they're definitely not a team that I'm really like looking and seeing, I need to be on them in this spot. So when I look at them, I think that against a really good defensive team, they're going to have problems. And I think against a good on ball defending team like Texas State, a team that really rotates well and plugs any like gaps and any like lanes to the rim, yeah, I think Texas State is the game to really target to fade UTSA. And obviously, with it being a Texas battle, that plays a factor also. So I look for Texas State to shut down UTSA in that game. And if they're a 5 to 7 point favorite, I'll be on Texas State and hoping that Steve Henson's defense definitely lets them down. All right. Let's go over to UTEP now. UTEP, listen, they didn't really do anything much that impresses me on the transfer portal, but Joe Golding definitely is going to start feeling the hot seat. He's got a good core of scoring guards and scoring wing players in Tay Hardy, Calvin Solomon, and Otis Frazier. So he needed to get himself another ball handler. He needed to get himself a 3-point shooter. And I think that's what he got when we talk about Baylor Head from Colorado State, when we talk about Yazid Powell from Buffalo. I think that Zid Powell is going to play some minutes for this UTEP team. I think that he could be your starting point guard. If he is, he's got to keep the turnovers down. But this is a guy that can get your offense going when you're lackadaisical and settling for jump shots. He can run and gun it, and he can get to the rim, and he can score at the free throw line. So even though it's not the impactful transfer that UTEP probably wants, I do think it's a solid player that can defend, that can run the offense, and can make good decisions with the basketball and help this offense out of the gutter. When I look at UTEP, the biggest issue for me is free throws. So any game that they're a couple point underdog, like I would expect against Cal or Loyola Marymount, I'll be looking to fade them. So they're gonna have to prove to me that they can hit second half free throws before I put money on them. Because last year they definitely gave me a lot of heartache, and I think that they're 2 out of their first 3 games. Personally, I think that they lose all 3 of their first games. So as much as the power rankings may like UTEP more because of their defense, I remember the free throw misses, and that's what plagues my memories. So you can be great defensively, but you still have to score a fair amount to win games and cover numbers. But if Loyola Marymount's a 2.5 point favorite, I'm all over that. If Cal's a 5 point favorite or less, I'm all over that. All right, UT Martin. So UT Martin did a pretty good job on the transfer portal. They had to obviously reload. I think that when you look at the fact that you already have Jordan Sears as your top dog, you have Desmond Williams, KK Curry, you don't need a ton, but you did go out and get a guy like Kenny White from Murray State, who's going to be a double-digit scorer for you. You got Issa Muhammad from New Mexico State, who definitely is going to be a dominant low post scorer and a good rebounder for you. I think they did a good job. One of the problems with this UT Martin team, obviously with Parker Stewart there last year, no longer there, is that he took a lot of those perimeter shots, and he definitely took a lot of the ball action away from this UT Martin team. With this type of front court acquisitions in White and Muhammad, there's going to be a lot of more inside out basketball. There's going to be a lot of more balance, and there's going to be a lot less driving to the bucket and forcing these drives that you saw UT Martin do often last year. I think that Ryan Ritter has a good group here. He did a good job of filling some holes, and if he can get some good production out of a guy like Justice Jackson from Hawaii, then I tip my hat to him. So, interesting group. I think that UT Martin is going to be a team that I look to back at home and fade on the road. They do have a bit of an easy schedule. The toughest game that they play, I think, is against like Mississippi State. So, I think that you could be getting some value with UT Martin as a favorite in a game like against North Alabama or Prairie View or maybe even Evansville. So nothing that really pops out to me about UT Martin, but I will remember that their schedule is quite weak. All right, UT Arlington. So obviously with UT Arlington, this is a team that can be very frustrating offensively. They can play some defense, so tip my hat to that. I think that they did a really good job of bringing in some scoring from the transfer portal in DeJuan Gordon from New Mexico State and Phil Russell from SEMO. Outside of that, there are a lot of question marks. I think that Shamar Wilson's going to have to be able to contribute down low with some nice dunks and drives. I think that a guy like Brandon Talbot's going to have to be able to produce some jump shot offense. But this is a UT Arlington team that is going to be a little better offensively, and they're just good enough defensively to win some of the games that they're expecting to. I think that once you look at some of their early non-conference games, they are a team that you probably can bet against. But I do think that in a game against a team like Texas State, I think that that defensive offensive balance and neither side of the basketball being able to take advantage of will help them. And having a guy like Gordon, having a guy like Russell who can create his own shot and shoot the ball when you need to win the game, that's going to play a big factor for this team. So I look forward to watching UT Arlington, but I think that there is going to be value betting against them against New Mexico early on if you see them as a 13-point underdog or less. All right. USC Upstate. Now, USC Upstate, I don't really have anything to say about them. I'm not really impressed with what they did on the transfer portal. I'm not really impressed with what they bring back. I think that there's a lot of question marks with this team from top to bottom, and it's just going to be a team that I have to watch and see before I get involved in anything to do with them. USC, I'll make this quick. You know, they bring in Isaiah Collier, who is going to be supposedly a very high quality collegiate player to pair up with Boogie Ellis. And these guys could give you 40 a game. I think that they need some protection. They need some rebounding. They need some defense. And that's what USC went out on the transfer portal and got. They got DJ Rodman from Washington State, who has turned himself into a pretty solid role player on a good team, and I think that he's going to be even better now at USC in the spotlight. I think that there's an instant made spot for him in the starting lineup, and I think that even though he's a bit undersized, he's going to be able to put in some work, and he probably leads this team in rebounding. With USC, obviously, I want to look for some of their like 12 to 15 point favorite spreads and then pound them on that. I think that their game against Brown, with Brown traveling cross country, is just a great spot for them. If they can cover 15 points, that would probably be my go-to spot in their first couple games. I think that they route everybody that they play early on. But I think from a betting perspective, with Brown having the cross-country travel, that helps them. So USC is going to be interesting. We'll see what happens, though. UNLV with Kevin Kruger. Yes, Lon Kruger's son, still the coach of this UNLV team. And he did a good job on the transfer portal. He brought in the Boone brothers from Pacific and Oklahoma State, respectively. And they brought in Jalen Hill, who's going to probably be the leading scorer of this offense alongside Justin Webster. I like what Jalen Hill brings as far as length, versatility, mid-range scoring, rebounding. I think that this is a really good pickup for them. I think that they're going to be a lot tougher. They're going to be a lot harder to drive and score against. And I think that fits what UNLV is trying to do. They're trying to be a better defensive team, but not taking away some of that offensive flair. And if you're undersized, you're going to have a tough time defending against this UNLV team with the addition of the Boone brothers to Isaiah Cottrell, who could be a double-double type guy this year. So there just really isn't a lot of height that you can take advantage of with this UNLV team, aside from Jackie Johnson III. But UNLV is going to be good. I think that they're going to be very hard to play against at home. And I think that they're going to give everybody their best shot with how physical and strong and upperclassmen they are with that front court. So liking what UNLV did, respecting what Kruger is trying to do over there. All right, UNC Wilmington. Now, they were definitely busy on the transfer portal. They went out and got KJ Jenkins from New Mexico. They got Jake Murphy from Air Force. They got my fellow Canadian Shamar Raton-Mays from Youngstown State. They got Ahmad Harvey from High Point. I think that all four of those guys are going to make very solid impacts to a team that is going to be very deep already. We're talking about a backcourt and wing core that has Trazarian White, Malik Harden-Hayes. Then you have Donovan Newby. Then you have Shaquem Phillips. Like, you got Nick Farr also. So I think that adding Raton-Mays, adding Harvey, adding KJ Jenkins, they're going to be very good acquisitions for this team. And we're not even talking about Jake Murphy. Like, for me, I think that this is a Wilmington team that Takayo Sidell has humming. They play great defense. They play great offense. You know, holding leads is going to be a big thing for them. And winning by more than we're expecting to. Like they sometimes struggle to cover numbers. And I think that with Wilmington, this is something that I think that improves with them this year with the versatility and the quality that they brought in. When you bring in my opinion, 4 potential impact transfers on a level where 2 out of 4 of them are coming from higher quality competition, I just think it's good. It's going to work out well for this Wilmington team in the Coastal Athletic Conference now. So it's not the Colonial anymore. They've changed that. Apparently, that was racist. Okay, UNC Greensboro. Now, with Greensboro, not much really to say about them. They brought in Team Caesar from Utah Valley, but outside of that, it's pretty much a similar team to last year. With the Langley brothers and Mikael Brown Jones being the focal point. So, not much to say about Mike Jones' team, except Mike Jones. All right. UNC Asheville, Mike Morrell's done a pretty good job with that team. He's got another year of Drew Pember, which is definitely fucking beneficial to any college coach. And he still has guys like Jamin Battle, Trent Stepney, Fletcher Abbey, who are all very impactful players if the coaching staff will allow it. They went out and got a guy like Greg Gant from NC State, who's going to be impactful defensively, rebounding, and scoring wise at this lower level in the Big South Conference. And then you bring in Josh Banks and Evan Johnson. Evan Johnson, I have a little more higher expectations for, but as a backup point guard, he's going to have a lot of competition getting on the floor with Trent Stepney, with Burgess, with Abbey. So there's a lot of guards that can handle the ball. So he's going to really have to stand out from the crowd. But listen, you tell me UNC Asheville has Drew Pember, I'm automatically going to be looking to bet on them. I think that if you see them against Michigan in their first game of the year as a 12 to 15 point underdog, you hit them because they're not losing that game by more than 10 points. So that's how I look at it. Asheville will come out and miss free throws. That's the one thing you have to remember about them. If they can improve that this year, they'll be even better. All right, so I only have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 more programs to talk about, and then I will vamoose back to work. When I look at UMBC, obviously UMBC is going to be one of the bottom barrel teams. Jim Ferry's taking over coaching. I'm not impressed defensively or offensively with what this team's going to do. I have to watch them play basketball to see what they're capable of. They brought in Marlon Short from Stanislaus Slate. He's supposed to be a scorer, so we'll see if he can actually score at the D1 level and why he wasn't recruited in the first place. I think that with Bryce Johnson coming in from Chicago State, he could be the focal point of the offense. Max Lorca-Lloyd could be a down low scorer, experienced collegiate player from Penn, and then Kadarius Smith could be your leading scorer from USC Upstate with his low block scoring and his physical brutality style of play. I think that this is a UMBC team that's going to play very differently than what we saw last year and makes me really want to watch them before I get involved with them whatsoever. UIC, all right. UIC did some work on the transfer portal. They brought in Marquise Kennedy from Loyola Chicago. They brought in Isaiah Rivera from Colorado State, and they brought in Yusuf Saleh from Idaho. All three of those guys are going to go very well with this Luke Yaklich team. I think obviously there has been some high expectations considering the coaching tree that he came from as far as being able to bring in impactful transfers. And he's going to have Toby Okani and Tyler Stevenson thank yous for bringing in some of these guys. I think that 2 out of 3 are potential double-digit scores. I think 2 out of 3 are going to play starter minutes. And I think that what this Illinois Chicago team was missing with all their departures from the transfer portal was backcourt scoring. And I think that they've answered that marvelously. I think Marquise Kennedy can run your offense. I think that Soleil can be your six man off the bench. And I think that Rivera can play the 2 or the 3 spot and give you double digit scoring. So Illinois Chicago is in a much better spot than they were last year. I think that the more team basketball that they can play, the tougher and more physical they are with their opponents, the better off that they're going to be. So like what Illinois Chicago did. As far as a game, I think that the game against Loyola Chicago is going to be a special one for Marquise Kennedy. And I think that he comes out with a special performance with his team, most likely a double-digit underdog on the road. So imagine the impossible, Illinois Chicago going in there and getting the outright win. Whew, sounds like a fucking cupcake to me. All right, UCLA, not much to talk about them. Lazar Stefanovic is going to come in. He could be their leading scorer for all I know. With his experience and how young this UCLA team is, there's a lot of question marks. I think that Bona could be huge. Dylan Andrews could be special. Will McClendon could be special. I'm just not sure. So once I see this UCLA team play, I'll have more on them. But just from a Mick Cronin perspective, I hope that they can play some defense because I see a team that could be getting freaking put over the wheelbarrow and wheel to their freaking graves. So not really understanding the projections and the power rankings for UCLA. But I definitely think that there are some major question marks when it comes to actually putting your hard-earned money on this team whatsoever. So peace. All right, UCF. Now, UCF obviously now in the Big 12 had to really step it up with their roster, with their depth, and they've done a good job of doing so. When you look at this team, Darius Johnson, CJ Walker, the guys that you know, you do have Taylor Hendricks' brother, Tyler Hendricks, coming in, so maybe he'll be as impactful as his brother, but probably not. And then you had to go out and get some pieces. You did a good job. You went out, you got some big men. You got Omar Payne, who's an experienced power conference player from Jacksonville. You got Ibrahim Diallo, a 7-footer from San Jose State. Then you went and got some scoring. You got some DeMar Langford from Boston College. You got Jalen Sellers from Ball State. You got Shamari Allen from Kansas City. I think that all these pieces work well in a conference that is going to be a major adjustment versus the American. I think Johnny Dawkins did a good job of making his team strong, experienced, and have the ability to thrive through negative experiences, which is bound to happen versus the quality in their conference. I think that UCF has to win with defense. I think that they have to be tough to drive against. I think that they have to be disciplined with their reach-ins. And I think that they got to believe in what the coaching staff has planned for this team. I don't see a perennial offensive UCF team. I see a hard to play against, tough-nosed, lunch pail fucking construction cap on your head type team. And if they can play that rock'em sock'em style, then I think that they can be successful. So I think that their first test against Miami in the second game, that's a good measuring stick to see if UCF is going to be the whipping boy or they're going to be doing the whipping. So we'll see what happens, but if they're a 10-point or more underdog on the road, I'll be looking to back UCF. Okay, UC Santa Barbara. Yes, UC Santa Barbara. They went out and got some guys that definitely underperformed at their previous stops. So I'm not really sure what to expect from them. I just think that Yohan Traore from Auburn is going to have a really nice time dominating in the Big West. And Joe Pasternak is a guy that knows how to get the best out of big men. So Looking forward to seeing that. Outside of that, I think that UC Santa Barbara is going to be a team that whoops up on quad 4 games, and those are the opponents that I'm looking to back them against. Teams like Northern Arizona, Howard, Portland State. These are the types of games that I want to back them against because obviously a lot of their conference is quad 4 games. So that's what I'll be looking for. Let's say they're 7 to 10 point favorite against Northern Arizona at home. I'll back them at that number. All right, let's talk about another Big West team, Eric Olin's UC San Diego team. Now, obviously, this group had to do some work on the transfer portal also, but they didn't really bring in anybody that I know that's worth talking about. So I am going to just move on from them. I think that with Jerron Brooks, Emmanuel Tishmanga, fellow Canadian mine, Bryce Pope, they'll be formidable, but I still think defensively they're going to be lacking. And I don't think that they have the 3-point shooting outside of Pope that we're used to seeing with this program. So unless Vuk Vukovic from Maine comes out and really has the type of year that he had when he was at, never mind. This is a guy that played at UTEP. Never mind. Thought it was a guy from Maine. Yeah, I just don't think that they have the 3-point shooting. So I'll move on from there. UC Riverside. Who do they bring in? They brought in Benjamin Grisetti from Incarnate Word. He's a 6'11", slender guy. I really don't see a lot of minutes working out for him with how UC Riverside is going to play. He is what Riverside usually likes to have in a bunch of big men, but outside of Jalen Martinez, I do think that his team plays a little smaller this year, and I think that playing Jalen Martinez and Kyle Owens is really going to take away a lot of minutes that City can fucking get. When I look at him offensively, he's got a 3-point shot. He's a really good 3-point shooter, but it's about the quality of opponent that he's hitting these threes against. So obviously in conference, he was a 39% 3-point shooter last year. So there obviously is some spot up duties for him. But the problem for me is just that he doesn't get to the free throw line. And when he does get to the free throw line, he's missing these free throws. So it's just not good for me to really put a lot of faith in a guy that's going to play like 10, 15 minutes and then be impactful. So unless the offense runs plays for him, I just don't see the upside that you get from having a guy with his 3-point shot and skill set in the lineup. So for UC Riverside, obviously with Kyle Owens, he probably is going to be the focal point of the offense. Will Tattersall will give you some 3-point shooting. But outside of that, it's a lot of unproven players. And when you lose the type of Zion Pullen type players that you lost last year, it's hard to refill the cupboard, especially when you're at the Big West and you're UC Riverside. So I don't think Riverside is going to be as dominant as they were last year, and I don't think that they're going to be able to make the comebacks that they were able to last year. All right, UC Davis. UC Davis is an interesting bunch. From the transfer portal perspective, they didn't really bring in anybody that I know. They brought in Drew Carter and Marcelius Robertson from Cal and Colorado, respectively. I think that they're going to really run out the same kind of lineup that they ran out last year. Focal point, Elijah Pepper. Secondary scoring, Ty Johnson. Secondary scoring, Kane Milling. They're going to be guard-oriented. The problem for them is can they hit goddamn free throws? Good defensive team, good on-ball defensive team. Can they hit free throws and not leave points at the free throw line? That's the biggest question for me, and I won't know until I see them play. UAB, and obviously with UC Davis, with a team that misses free throws and is going to be a favorite in a couple games, especially in the non-conference, it makes me hesitant to tell you to put your money on it or for me to put my money on it. So move on from that. All right, we're on the last team, and it's UAB. UAB went out and got Daniel Ortiz from North Alabama, Will Shaver from North Carolina, James White from Ole Miss, and Barry Dunning Jr. from Arkansas, who I don't even think sees the floor. Usually, we're looking at UAB and Andy Kennedy's team as being very good defensively and offensively. I do think that they'll be good defensively. I just question what this offense is going to look like. Daniel Ortiz, Alejandro Vasquez, Eric Gaines. There isn't that All American standout scorer that we're used to. And what are they going to get as far as low post scoring? Because with Yaxel Lenderborg or Christian Coleman, I have to admit, I don't know who the fuck these guys are. So with Andy Kennedy and the way that he's reloaded, it's leaving me with definitely a lot of questions and making them an unbettable team, at least early on in the year. Obviously, Alejandro Vasquez is close to my heart, former St. Bonaventure player, didn't play last year. I think he can be very impactful if he's fixed his three-point shot, because one of the major concerns with him is can he get his good shots against high quality opponents. And in conference, when he played for St. Bonaventure versus versus A10 schools, he was a good 3-point shooter. He was above 30%. But it was when you were playing those top quality opponents that his 3-point shot disappeared. And that's what I worry about. A good free throw shooter, can handle the ball, can take the ball away, can take care of the basketball. I think that he's going to fit well into the system. I just don't see the fighter power that I'm used to seeing with UAB, and I just don't see them really staying in the top 100. So transferring conferences, moving to the American Athletic is definitely going to be troublesome for them, and I would actually be looking to bet against them early on in the year against Middle Tennessee State on the road and then Clemson on a neutral court. So we'll see how it goes. That is it for me. We did all the U's and all the V's, and I will be back on Monday because the next 2 days I am working with football and all these sports that are on the weekend. So there's lots of trading department decisions to make of how to get that extra juice out of the bettors and then how to limit the people that are winning. So that's it for me. I'm out of here. Have a great rest of your day. I will tell you now, Brown and Harvard are playing today in FCS football, and I'm looking at Brown with the points as the dog if I can get 19.5.